sharing my thoughts and doing a little demo on a few different aspects of powder. Well, let me think. Fusible powder basting option versus the spray basted option. So last week, if you missed episode 65 here of WIP Wednesday, definitely go back and check it out, especially if you're a quilter or you deal with multiple layers of fabric that you want to hold together, like we do a quilt sandwich for quilting. Well, last week during the chat, several of you said that you had tried the powder, the fusible powder basting method. And so I said I hadn't tried that yet. So I was going to get some, try it out. And so I am back this week to share my thoughts and show you how it works. And we even went ahead and stocked it in the shop. We don't have that many, but for those of you that do want to try it, definitely check it out. We'll put the link for you in the chat here on Facebook, and it's in the description box already if you're watching us on YouTube, okay? So a couple things. One is my shirt. For those of you that crochet out there, our little magic formula of crafts edition of t-shirts, we have one that says fabric plus thread equals magic. We have one now that says needles plus yarn equals magic. And now this one says hook plus yarn equals magic. So if you're a crocheter or you're looking for a gift for a crocheter in your life, we have these t-shirts in, I think, extra small to 3XL on the website. So you can head on over to craftygemini.com/shop, and we have a category called t-shirts and more. And you can find all of those t-shirts in there. Okay. Let's make sure everybody can see me and hear me just fine. Hi, Clarice, tuning in from the Villages, Florida. That's just south of us here. Deborah from Port St. Lucie, another Florida neighbor. We got Elaine tuning in from Frankfurt, Germany. Hey. Awesome. We got Lori in the house from South Jersey. Great. So it looks like y'all can see me and hear me fine. We're going to go ahead and get started. So let's switch over to my over-the-shoulder camera, please. A sip of water, and let's get started. So this is the sample that I was working on last week, where I was sharing with you spray basting and also hand basting, which is my typical, I would say maybe 85% of the time I'm working on some type of a quilted project. 85% of the time I probably hand based, and maybe the other 15% I use a spray based if it's like a little craft project or something like that. So let's talk a little bit about that. And again, I'm not going to do the demo on the hand basting since I did it last week. So you can go back and watch WIP Wednesday episode number 65 to show the exact technique that I use for that. But today we are doing this little thing here where we are comparing, contrasting the Sulky KK2000 temporary spray adhesive, and then I have the Quilter Select Free Fuse. It says it's a semi-permanent fusible powder. So right off the bat, one is obviously an aerosol spray and the other one is a powder that comes in this little canister. Now this one is temporary and this one says semi-permanent. This will not wash out. As far as the research that I did on it from the manufacturer, it says it won't wash out, but you can kind of peel it apart and take it off if you want to. The Sulky KK2000 is a temporary spray adhesive. I've had projects where I've used this on it, and say you like spray base the layers together. If you set it aside for like 6 months, you come back and you're like, I could have sworn I spray basted this. I don't know where it goes, but like there will be no more adhesion there. So it's definitely temporary and it does go away. I don't know specifically about washing it out. Really, I've never even tested that because after I spray baste it, I go in and quilt it. So the layers are going to be held together permanently and they're not in a condition for me to kind of like pick it up and see if it held or not. So that's that. Now, let's talk about this guy because this is the new one on the block, at least for me here. And remember I said we now carry it in our online shop. So this is 2 ounces worth of the fusible powder. It comes in this little canister, this little shaker thing, in a bag. So you need to cut like the little corner of the bag and then pour the powder in here. And then the little lid, the little shaker top part of it is, it depends on when you open it. Sometimes it's like stuck up here or sometimes it'll be like right there. This is probably the trickiest part of setting this up because this, and I can't even take it out anymore because I obviously set it up and put it in, but it's like that cardboardy material. So you need to like kind of pinch it around all sides as you slip it inside so that it goes all the way in and flat. So it's funny because I read that on some of the reviews, people were like, after struggling with the container, now I love it. So it's a little bit of a struggle to just slip the round shaker top into the main container after you've already poured the powder in there. So I will say, and those of you that have tried this, go ahead and let us know your thoughts in the chat box. Remember that we do have it in the shop. So if you're an experimenter like me, or you're looking for something like this after you see my demo, definitely head over to craftygemini.com/shop to grab yourself a 2-ounce little shaker. Now, there's quite a bit in here. As I was pouring it in, I had to kind of tap it to make sure I didn't overflow it. So just, you know, tap, tap a little bit as you go down. Now, I will say, I had not tried the fusible powder method before because for me, I'm not a huge fan of fine powders. For somebody who does a lot of gardening and deals with dirt and hay and dust and stuff out here, like anything that's a powder, I stay away from, especially when you get into like dyeing a yarn or fabric and stuff like that. We work with really fine powders, so I have like a huge protective mask with all the filters and stuff. And so I was like, people are hesitant to work with a an aerosol can, but I was like, I'm not a huge fan of powders. So this aerosol can, I will say, is my favorite, the Sulky KK2000, when I do need a spray-based product or spray adhesive, because it basically has no odor and based on the labeling as well, seems to be a lot safer for us and the environment than some of the other products. So this one says it's safe for you, exclusively non-flammable, it's non-toxic, odorless, and it's clear. And then it says safe for our planet, ozone friendly, and has no CFCs or HCFCs. So if you are hesitant on the aerosol, but you think you might want to try this, this is the one I recommend, and the link for that is also in the box below. Now, the powder. It's not a type of powder like I thought it was going to be. And let me get my pressing mat here ready. I'm thinking dusty powder, okay? This is more of like a granular powder. So it's not as like it just dusts and puffs into the air. If you're a quilter and maybe we've used those pounce pads for chalk that we use sometimes, you know, with the templates to quilt our designs or to lay out the chalky design so that then you can go in and free motion quilt it. This is not dusty like that. It's like a granular powder. And this is how I like to talk about it, is if you sew a lot of handbags, let's say, we often have 100% cotton woven fusible interfacing. And I have some here, so I'll grab it. This is, I use Bosel Fashion Fuse. So this is a chunk of woven fusible interfacing. And you know how I always say in the tutorials, like, make sure that you have the scratchy side, I like to call it, on the back of the fabric. Well, the scratchy side that you feel there is the side that has the dots of adhesive, right? So when we put that to the back of fabric, then we fuse it from the cotton side, it melts those tiny little dots, and that is what glues your fabric to it, okay? When you make a lot of bags, these little bits of adhesive oftentimes get all over your table. Let me know in the chat if that has happened to you, where after you're done working on these projects, you're like swiping like breadcrumbs off the table, but they're like little adhesive granules that have come off as you've been manipulating the woven fusible. That is, those little granules is like what this feels like to me, okay? So, oh, this looks a little dark. It's because I'm using dark fabric and the light background. Whoop, went dark. Ta-da, a little lighter. Okay. I needed to use a little bit of more high contrast fabrics here too because of the powder. So here's one thing. We'll talk about this in a second, but let me do a little demo. So here I have a pretend quilt sandwich. I have my backing fabric with the pretty side facing out. Okay. Let's see. Then we have the middle layer, we have our cotton batting. So one thing I did find in my research about this product is that they do recommend that you use it on a cotton, okay? On the cotton side of stuff. So here's the little shaker bit. The holes are pretty small. At first I thought, oh my gosh, this is gonna come, like a lot of it is gonna come out because these holes are kind of big for when you think a powder. But again, I think more like granules, okay? And I'm going to, I guess I'll show you this here first, and then I'm going to do it on fabric, because what I want you to see is what the little granules look like. And when you do it on a white, this is even a natural colored batting, and you won't be able to see it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to zoom it in and pretend that you can see it. Okay? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my shaker. Maybe you can even see it as it comes out. And I'm just going to shake. I don't know that you can see that. But this is one of the complaints that I saw. People were like, oh, I wish it was a different color. but I'm sure that would be a hassle because imagine this came in a specific, like it had a tinge of color to it. If you were using it to fuse white fabric with white batting and then you have like transfer of color or dyes, that would be a huge problem, right? So I just sprinkled a little along this bit. Okay, and that way I didn't do the whole thing so that you can see that once we fuse it, we'll pick it up from the other side and see what we get. So then I put my fabric back on it. Now, the instructions recommend that you use either parchment paper or some type of a Teflon sheet on top. I have two different types of pressing sheets here because I use heat presses for all kinds of stuff. So, but if you have like a Teflon sheet, you can even get them by the roll online, or parchment paper. If you have that in your kitchen, just go ahead and grab that. You'll just place it over top and then take your iron to it. Now the iron settings, I know some people have used like medium heat. I have my Tefal iron. This iron is the hottest one, like it gets the hottest from all the irons that I have. And so I have it set to the highest setting. It's not that hot because I have to kickstart it back on. But the instructions say to hold it for about 4 seconds. I did that multiple times and I found that with this Teflon sheet, 4 seconds was not really enough for me. So we'll do a little bit like that and I'm just pressing it down. Then like with any other fusible product, and you'll have heard me say this a ton of times when we're using fusible, look at this, fusible battings or fusible fleece or anything like that. This, remember, we only put the powder on the batting. So the only thing that's going to be fused at the moment is the fabric to the batting, which obviously has worked. But what I was saying was with any fusible product, after you hit it with the iron to fuse it into place, I never touch it. Like I don't start like fuse it right there and then like, let me lift it up and see if it's stuck. You have to wait for that adhesive to cool back down and then stick to the fabric. If you peel it while it's warm, that's exactly what you're going to do. Peel it off. Okay. So that's not really the best way to check if it worked or not. Okay. So give it a, 20 seconds or so, let it cool. And now I'm going to pull back on this side and see where it stops so that I see where the stuff stuck. So let's get rid of the backing for now. So you can see that it did. It worked. It fused it, and I barely needed anything. Now, one of the things that I wanted to see was how stiff does it make it, right? Because we talk about this often when we use fusible adhesives or fusible interfacings, right? Depending on how thin or thick the fleece, like the fusible fleece, the fusible batting, the interfacing is, plus the amount of adhesive on it, that can completely change the hand of your fabric. It can make it super duper stiff. So the same thing is going to apply with this. The more you put, the stiffer it's going to be because the more glue you're adding in between the layers. Does that make sense? So if you're basting a larger piece, my recommendation would be to put the powder along the edge a little bit thicker and then kind of in the middle where you just needed to tack down somewhat, but not like a super hard fuse. I would probably go a little bit more easy-handed along the middle area, okay? I just don't want the edges lifting up. So let's go ahead and do the other side. And this is the same way I would do with the spray base. Remember we talked about this last week in episode 65, is that I place everything together, you peel back one side. In this case, do either or, spray based or use the free fuse, sprinkle it there, fuse that. If you're doing the spray, you don't need an iron, okay? It just sticks like that. Then we come and flip back the opposite half, and then we're gonna sprinkle here. And again, you can't really see it, but I'm gonna show you a different, and I'm like, let me put my face in here so I can see that I'm not putting a lot. It's tricky to see, that's the hardest part, is to make sure that it's actually coming. Like you can be shaking all day, but if it's not actually coming out of the little holes, then you're not really doing nothing. But I can see the little granules. Okay, so that we cover with the pressing sheet. And for those of you that have never used a parchment paper chunk or an applique pressing sheet or whatever, this is basically to protect your iron from any little stray bits of that adhesive. So the powder, and I would recommend this. Most of the time, if I'm using a fusible product or something, I don't really use a pressing mat. If you do a lot of applique work, chances are you have a bunch of these different sheets. But because this is a loose little powder, you can easily, and it's tricky to see, you can easily kind of like shake it off in an area that you don't really want it. So you don't want that to hit your iron. Okay, so again, now I don't even know which way I did it, but we'll peel it up in a second and see. Remember to let it cool. We don't want to peel it while it's still warm, because if we do, we're just gonna peel it off. And I can see, look, that last little corner that I didn't put anything on is the only thing that's not stuck. So yeah, everything is attached. Ta-da! Super easy. So the little thing is pricey. It ain't that cheap, okay? But 2 ounces, I mean, at the little minimal amount of sprinkling that you need, I think it's worth a shot to try it out, especially if you work on a lot of kind of smaller projects, or you're doing placemats, or table covers, like just simple things that you're tackling maybe on your home sewing machine. This is probably a quickie, super quickie way to do that. Now, if that's the quilt top to the batting, look at that. And I'll tell you, I don't know if you can see it that well, but you can see that it's still pretty pliable, even with the cotton batting on, plus the fused adhesive powder, okay? It's still pretty pliable, so just looking at it, I can tell that this would be really easy to quilt through by hand even. Let's go ahead and use it on the other side. We know it will work because it's cotton fabric to cotton batting, exactly what we just did before. But this time, I'm gonna sprinkle on the fabric and zoom y'all in and hope that y'all can see this. And my allergies are killing me, y'all. It's definitely spring here in Florida. Okay. I'm going to sprinkle some just kind of in the middle because I don't want it going all over the place. Plus, my little quilt top here is smaller than the backing. So let's focus it here. Can y'all see that? You know what? Hold on. Let me... Oh, look. Let's do this. Cotton to cotton. I'm going to get rid of this. I just didn't want it to pour over my tabletop. I'm going to use a fabric that's more solid because I really want y'all to see what the composition of that powder is. And I'm determined to show it to y'all with the camera shot. Okay. I'll leave that off to the side. Let me get a solid dark fabric here. Here we go. Let's zoom out. Yes, I think you will be able to see this once I get this thing focused. My fingers, focus, please. Great. Okay. So, here goes. Yes! You can see it now. And hold on, let me see my chat because my whole iPad fell down. So, do you see how it's like little granules? And they feel like little granules. So if you are hesitant like I was to try this out because of the powder terminology used, it's not a dusty powder at all, okay? It feels like the little bits that we clean up after we use adhesive so much. Or like fusible interfacing. Marilyn says, I'm glad to see you comparing these products. Thanks. Well, you're welcome. I'm in the mood for like some experimenting and stuff like that. So you can see how, I mean, that's a lot. So imagine 2 ounces. Like I barely have used anything from here. And I think this will go a super duper long way. Now that this has had a chance to cool, let's go ahead and see. So that's stuck in there. And remember I said that on the packaging it says it's semi-permanent? This is what I mean by that too, is that it's held there in place. It won't wash off. But if you force it apart, it will come apart, right? So if you mistakenly fuse it somewhere, and especially if you were light-handed on the sprinkling, it'll be even easier to separate it, okay? So like that. Just pull it apart, okay? If you need to, and like redo it, okay? So that's that. Now, putting this on fabric, let me fold this up. I'm about to have all these little sprinkly powder all over my floor here. But here's something that I did earlier that I was like, you know what? This little powder would be amazing for this. Any quilters out there recognize what this sample would be of? A pretend fusible applique, okay? So, for example, if I take my fabric, and you know that when we're working on fusible applique, there's so many different fusible interfacing or fusible paper-backed fusible products that you can use. They come in so many different weights. Oftentimes I want something that's like a little bit softer and has a nicer drape, and then I grab what I have in my stash and it's like super heavy duty, fusible paper-backed adhesive. And that's not what I want because then it makes my project super stiff, okay? So with this product, those of you that like to do applique or art quilt, I think you are in for a treat because I fused this circle here to the fabric and look, it's still pretty drapey. Yes, it has a little more body in this area because it's 2 layers of fabric, right? We added another layer plus a little light sprinkling of adhesive. And so I thought, you know what? I could probably based on how much of the free fuse product I sprinkle on, I can make the applique pieces be either lighter or a little bit more stiff based on how much of it I sprinkle on, right, between the layers. So say we cut out a circle, and this is just fabric, or an oval. Oh, Lord, definitely not a circle, but okay. I'll make it a circle. Say you cut out an egg. Okay, close enough, right? And then we want to fuse it to something. So like you're making a baby quilt, an art quilt, a mini quilt on the wall, a little eyeball, whatever it is. Look at this, fabric to fabric. That's it. So the only thing that I wish I could do was like sprinkle on this and then flip it, but you can't because it's loose powder. I've tried it, trust me. It like some of it stays on, some of it goes all over the place, so it's not worth it. So I would see exactly where you want to fuse this and barely tap it into place. Like barely sprinkle anything on. Oh my goodness, and look at that. You can actually see the powder on this fabric. Amazing. So that little bundle there is the fusible, or the free fuse, the fusible powder. Then I'll put my fabric on top. Then remember to use this in case you had any bit of that powder that got off, you know, from underneath. And then we're going to fuse it. Carol says, is it like salt? It kind of is. I would say it's not as uniform as salt granules. Like some are smaller, some are a little bit bigger, some are elongated. So yes, in that range though, but it is like that. Like it's definitely raised. When you sprinkle it on the fabric, I can definitely feel that it's like up. It's not just like a flat powder, okay? So there that is. Give it a few seconds for it to cool down. Yes, oh, and Jan had said it earlier. She says almost looks like salt. Yes. That's exactly right. So I'm glad that I tried it out, that y'all recommended it, and that I tried it out enough to see that I actually like it, you know? Because, again, powders, I'm just like, it's a powder. But it's not really a powder. All right, so we have that. Now let's see if we pick up along all the sides. If you recall, remember, I put the little sprinkle like almost right in the middle of this. So here off the sides, there's a little bit that's not fused. And then on this side, it's not too fused, right? Because I didn't cover the whole area. So one thing that you can do, if you are someone who does a lot of fusible applique, I think would be to kind of like cover a good bit and maybe even like manipulate it so you make sure that it's like under all the edges and you don't have any extra. If you do have extra, I would brush it off for sure, especially if you're doing it straight on your project. I would brush it off of the area before pressing it, because that's the only thing that you need to think about where you're sprinkling it, because wherever there's some of this free fuse, it's going to be glue after you hit it with the heat, okay? So let's see. Debbie says, I can see using this for an orange peel quilt block. Ooh, interesting. Now, you know what would be cool? To come up with a way to maybe sprinkle some of this off, maybe into the cap, and just like with like a little palette knife or something, to get some and sprinkle it like in a line, right? Because since we have the little sprinkle top here, it's like a shaker. So it's going to go everywhere that there's holes. Oh, you know what you can do too is tape off some of these holes. If you need like a narrower, to dispense a little bit narrower of an area. Oh my gosh, 300 IQ. Yeah, I would probably do that. Is like painters tape some of these off, or even all of them except one, and then leave the one and you can get really, really precise sprinkling of it. I also have seen where people use it along the edge of their quilts to like temporarily baste the binding, similar to how we use a glue basting technique. You could use the powder as well. So super interesting. So I thought I would show you that so that you could see that with the with like fusible applique. And I think that's great because a little bit is enough to hold a fabric in place. And then if you go in and like stitch around it or do decorative quilting or thread painting, that's plenty for that to hold in place. And then the stitches that go over top of it will hold all your layers together, especially if this is going to be backed, right, with batting. Then you have more stabilization, even if it's not fully fused down. So you just can use a little bit just to make sure that your pieces stay in place. Because if you, like me, have ever fused or have ever tried to do not fusible applique, like just like freeform applique with no fusible, I've tried that before. Like when I first started trying applique, I didn't have all the interfacing products, all the paper-backed fusibles and stuff. And I would do the same thing. Like I would just take a little piece of fabric, put it on top, and pin it and try to hold it in place while I went in and stitched it on the machine. The whole thing is going to move. It moves, it puckers, it buckles on you. It's a nightmare. And so having a little bit of that powder to just kind of steady it without having any pins in your way, especially for something round or any awkward shaped pieces, I think is super ideal. Now, Linda's asking, can you peel and refuse it? Let's try it and see. So because it is a semi-permanent, look at this. If I pull this back, I've removed it, which this is something good to know too. I haven't damaged the fabric underneath, which is great, right? Because sometimes we can use products where like you're not going to be able to just do that. You know, you'll wreck the finished project that's there. So that's kind of good to know. I also want to show y'all that so you can, oh, and you can see it good there. You can see exactly where the powder was and what it was holding on to as far as the top fabric goes. So let's try it. If we flip it back down, and because it still looks like you can see the individual granules, I'm going to try this and see if there is enough adhesive still, right, in those little granules there to refuse into place. So let's just hit it with the heat and see. Scrapping Goddess is asking, where could we find the link to your friend's shop to buy the fine point for the Elmer's glue? It's on Etsy. We can, I'm pretty sure that's Alex. Just email me or post in the group on Facebook and we'll send you the link again. It's her Etsy shop is Dragonfly Quilt Works, all together like that, my friend Laura. But you know, Etsy has a weird search thing where like you can't just type in the shop name to find the shop. It's kind of a mess. So we'll send you the link, Alex. Just send me an email or ask in the Facebook group. When I get off, I can do that. Okay, so we've done it. We fused it back after peeling it up. I'm going to let it cool as usual. And I can already tell you, look, it's not going nowhere. So yes, you can. Now, the cool thing here is, and let me try to do this to this side too. If you recall, we sprinkled what? The background fabric, okay? So if I peel this up, notice that the adhesive granules are on the top fabric. So that makes this now kind of like a little fusible sticker because the same way that it happened here, I can take this now and instead of putting it here, I can move it over and put it here. Oh my goodness, my allergies. Ugh. And Lid is asking, do you think a little salt shaker would work? I think so. You just have to make sure that whatever other shaker you plan to put this in, if that's what you're trying to do is kind of concentrate in a smaller spot, you just got to make sure, like pour out some of the granules and have a look at them and see to make sure that whatever little shaker you plan to use, that the holes are large enough for the size of the granules to fit through. Beyond that, I don't see why not. Just make sure that the container is one washed, right? And make sure it's absolutely dry. I would not add this into anything that was damp or wet. So look, this is stuck now, and this is stuck now. I think that's great. Even though I sprinkled the powder onto the background fabric, and I mean, I can feel like a little residue still left on there. But you can just, yeah, that's it. I just scratched it off, and it feels perfectly smooth again. There's nothing left there. It hasn't damaged the fabric. And so if you put this down and fuse it to somewhere that you don't like, just wait till it fully dries. Then peel it up like we just did for both of these, and then restick it down somewhere else. Ugh, that's amazing. And it doesn't even say that on here. Like that's not part of the marketing info on the product that I've seen. So I think that that's great. And I'm glad that we tried that out right here so you all can see. JC was asking, do you feel any leftover on the decorative fabric after peeling it off the circle? Yeah, so I just mentioned that. You kind of just scrape it off and that's it. I don't feel anything else right there. Okay, so I think that's great. Let's see what else. I know, right? Alex, it's so cool. Look at this. And it's completely flat, which is funny because when I peeled this up and I showed y'all where the granules were, they feel a little grainy to the touch here, what's left over. But when it's fused, like I literally cannot feel anything underneath. So I don't know if I would put this down as like semi-permanent. I would say like temporary. I mean, I guess it holds for however long you want it to, but since you can remove it and readjust it, I think this is great. Look at that. And it's so, I'm so curious as to why the granules stick to the top fabric instead of the bottom. I guess because it's the one that I'm peeling away. I bet if I peeled away the back fabric, it probably would stay to that one. Who knows? But look at that. Readjustable and repositionable. Love it. Love, love, love it. Okay, somebody posted the Etsy link for the glue tip, so thank you for putting that in the chat. Let me grab a sip. Ray's asking, is it washable? It is, and well, washable as in it is able to be washed, but not washable in the sense that it will wash away if you do use it in a project that you end up washing. Does that make sense? Let me think about this one. Roxana says, perhaps we could sprinkle onto the nonstick pressing sheet, then peel to get more precise shapes. Girl, let's try it. Should we try it? Let me see. Do I have a big enough piece of fabric? I think I know what you're saying. I love these these experiments. Okay, so let's try it. I'm going to take this chunk of fabric. And this is basically like when you do fusible applique, that you fuse a whole chunk of fabric to the product. Then you peel off the paper backing or not. You can cut out your individual shapes and then peel off the paper backing. Meaning you're starting off with a fully adhered sheet of fabric that already has the adhesive on it. Then you cut your shapes from that. Girl, and this is going to be hilarious because that way, if yeah, let's try it. Good. I have two sheets, so I'm going to put one on top and one on the bottom. Oh my gosh, y'all going to have me over here wrecking all my work surface, but let's see. So if I put, oh my word, I can kind of see where the stuff is here. I'm trying to make sure it's a smaller piece than my fabric. I'm placing it lightly on top because I don't want the fabric to move it out of place. Oh, Lord. Let's see. Then I'm going to sandwich it on top with another sheet of a parchment paper sheet. And then let's fuse it. Let's see. I hope it releases fully from that sheet. It should. Yeah, I see Gisela in Sweden says, I love the KK2000. I do too. I mean, if I'm using a spray base, that is my favorite product to use. It's definitely the safer option of the spray base, at least in my opinion. Okay, I'm going to scoot this a little, make sure I fuse this side. Oh, this is fun. So remember that we do have it in the shop. So if y'all want to be experimenting like me, definitely go ahead and grab one. If you have a project in mind that you know it will work well on, we definitely have some in the shop, craftygemini.com/shop. So it's the Quilter Select Free Fuse, okay? And for those of you that want to go to Amazon and look it up, it's not sold on Amazon, so you won't find it there. Okay, let me see. Maybe I should have let it cool a little bit first. I want to see. The adhesive should come to the fabric, you think? Let's see what's going on. Okay, I feel the granules on the fabric itself, but there's still some on this. So hold on. I'm going to fuse this again because it was still hot too. So let me let it cool completely and then we'll try it again. But I think this is going to work. Right now, because I peeled it off a little bit warm, I felt like half and half. Half the granules were on the back of the fabric and the other half were still on the pressing mat. So we're about to find out. Linda says sewing science, my favorite kind, right? Well, food science is my favorite, but sewing science is cool too. Okay. Yes, so Kathy says she's been wanting to try the fusible powder since there's no smell, there's no overspray to deal with like when using spray. And I will say my main concern was the fact that it said powder, like everything you hear is like a powder, fusible powder. And I'm not a fan of powders because I don't want to be breathing in any thin powders. But again, like I've been talking about here on this episode, it's not really a powder to me at least. It's more like granules, like salt, like we've talked about before, like a really, not even, I wouldn't even say like a really, oh, this is working. Okay, y'all cannot see this, but there's barely anything on the sheet, and I can see the sheen on the fabric itself. You know how sometimes you fuse a product to the back of your fabric, and you can see the sheen of that adhesive? Oh yeah, we're in business. Who gave me this idea? I forgot your name. Let's see. Nubian Roxana. Shout out to you. So I see the sheen on the back of the fabric. Dun, dun, dun. Let's grab a little rotary cutter. I'm going to continue to keep the adhesive. Where's my little rotary cutter? I'm going to continue to keep the adhesive facing up just because I don't want to put it down on here. Plus, since I didn't do a great job sprinkling even, I want to try and grab or cut a chunk that has, I guess I'm going to have to use scissors. Or let me cut a bigger chunk with the big rotary cutter. I'm looking at the sheen of the adhesive on here, so I want to kind of cut a bigger chunk. Oh Lord, I got even the biggest rotary cutter I had. Could have just used this one. Which obviously needs a new blade. Hold on, y'all. Let me just cut this piece off without cutting my fingers. Okay. Okay, I'm looking at it. I'm looking. Looks like adhesive is all over it. And I don't know if y'all can see, but it's like a slight sheen. Anyways, I know the adhesive is there. I can see it and I can feel it too. So let's go ahead and fuse it onto here, since this is just a different colored fabric. So now I'm just going to take this and place it here. I'll take my sheet again. Let me see. Where did I... trying to feel for the adhesive. So there is a bit right here in the area where I fused it. You can kind of hear that crunchiness. There's a little bit of the powder stuck there. So you will just, obviously this is the Teflon sheet, so it's non-stick. So you would just, scrape it off, wipe it down, wash it or whatever before you used it again in something else. But I think this is going to work. So you could fuse a full sheet of fabric by sprinkling it on. You can even just do it to the fabric. We sprinkled it on the non-stick sheet, but if you took, say, like a fat quarter of fabric and flipped it pretty side face down on your pressing surface, and then sprinkled the powder on the wrong side of the fabric and then put the pressing sheet on top, that would be another way to do it too. And then fuse that. So yeah, Nubian Roxana, she says, woohoo, it worked. Now I'm gonna need to just be patient and let it cool first. That's exactly right. So just be patient, let it cool. And then we're gonna, what's up with the yellows and oranges I'm using today? Sorry about that, but look, dun, 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 it's stuck. Yes. So for fusible applique, this is where it's at, y'all, if you want to cut multiple shapes out of the same scraps and bits of fabric. So that definitely worked too. What a great use. Yes, Barb says, I love collages. This would be amazing. Absolutely. Especially when you cut out like on like landscape art quilts where the backgrounds, maybe you have like some mountainous chunks or bits that look like waves of water and you're usually cutting out larger chunks. Perfect for that because you can take a whole scrap, fuse the whole thing, and then use little bits around in the full size of the quilt project, but use some larger chunks without having to individually sprinkle and fuse each bit. Wow, that was so, so cool. Okay, so that is what I have for y'all today about the Quilter Select Free Fuse. I'm going to have this now side by side with my spray based. And going forward, I will check back in with y'all to let you know what have I found that I'm like leaning towards more for using the Free Fuse versus the Sulky KK2000. One thing is that obviously one requires the heat of an iron versus the other one doesn't. But then it's also you have spray, overspray. If you spray too large of an area, you can make your cutting mats tacky. So it definitely takes a little getting used to also and being mindful of how much you're spraying as you do. Whereas with the little sprinkling shaker here that we have that comes with the Free Fuse, it's just a little bit easier, I think, to be soft-handed with it, especially if you tape off some of the like the openings of the shaker. Tape them all off until you get used to it, And then if you find that you got the handle on shaking it lightly and you want more, you want less, I would just tape off. And I would use obviously a tape that didn't have a really tacky adhesive like washi tape or like a painter's tape, masking tape, something like that, okay? So Connie's asking, how large of a quilt can you do with the KK2000? You can make as big a quilt as you want until the bottle runs out. You can spray as much as you want of this, I've done really large quilts. Obviously, the larger the quilt, the more of the spray you're going to eat up. Same thing goes for this. It's like anything. The bigger the project is, the more it's going to take up. And now I will say, for a larger project, because the free fuse is semi-permanent and gets fused into place, you are less likely to have the layers moving on you if you use something like this free fuse. Or if you use a proper fusible batting that already has the adhesive sheet on it, you know, built in, you would fuse that, and then your fabric layers are less likely to move. Whereas if you're doing no type of basting adhesive at all, then the hand basting tends to hold things really well. But with the spray, because it is temporary, any movement or stretch or lifting up on it is going to move the layers, and it will, you're basically taking it off because it's temporary. It's completely repositionable. It's not like this where like I have to pull on it to take it off, to take the layers apart after it has already been fused. This one, after you spray, you can smooth, take off, like you can just reposition as many times as you want, which can also be helpful. So it just, you got to weigh out what your goals are and what your specific needs are when deciding between these two. I will say that I like the Sulky KK2000 more than any other spray adhesive on the market, for sure. Even though it's a smaller bottle, I feel like it goes a longer way, plus it's a safer and healthier option. But I am really surprised at how far I think. So obviously, I haven't used the whole thing yet, but based on little samples and how I've been using it since I got this, there's still a ton left in here. So I'm really impressed, and I'm curious to see how long it will take me to go through 2 ounces, even on some larger projects, because this is like a lot. Those little granules, every single one, whenever you have one little granule there, it's sticking wherever that one is. So I'm curious to see how long this will last, but I think it's safe to say that a little goes a long way with this one too, as y'all saw. Okay. So yeah, I see somebody's asking about the refill of the 2-ounce powder that comes in this. So if you were to get one and save it so you still had the same shaker setup, we're waiting on an order of the refill powder in here. So we'll have that for sale probably by next week on our shop too, so that you can order that if that's what you'd like. Okay, so we have links to both of these products if you want to try them out. Use them on your projects and let me know what you think. I am kind of really liking this, like, getting y'all's feedback, finding a new product, featuring it, demoing it, giving your thoughts, listing them in our shop if it's something that people want to get. So let me know what other types of products in the chat box below you'd like to see me either review, try out, or demo, or carry in the shop. I'm definitely going to be working on some more research on things like this because I think this is super fun, especially for those of us that have multi-crafts, right? You can go ahead and put them back to my face. Take a sip of water. And that way I can be trying them out. It's kind of like I sew clothes, I sew bags, I sew quilts. And so I take from like quilting techniques and use them in garment sewing. We use some fun techniques that really work in garment sewing and we use them in our bag making or our quilting. And so I like to mix and match and crisscross my crafts, the different products and techniques that we use. So I'm definitely interested in playing around with some more fun stuff. And I'll take all y'all's recommendations, okay? So let me know that in the chat box. Lori has a great question. She says, could a humid climate make the powder clump up? So I'm glad that you asked that because it actually comes with a little silica pack inside the container. So make sure to keep that in there so that can help you absorb any moisture and humidity in the air so that it doesn't, because that could potentially be a problem. All right, great question. Okay. Yay! I see y'all are saying that you love the product demos. Great. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Remember that the products featured today, the Quilter Select Free Fuse is what I was demoing. This is a powder fusible, a fusible powder option for basting or for applique and a bunch of other uses as we talked about today. Definitely check us out. If you are not yet subscribed to our email newsletter, let me plug it here. That is the best way to keep in touch with what I have going on, any new products that we featured, what new clubs and classes we have going on, which we are in the works of launching 2 new clubs and course bundles, I should say. So definitely be on the lookout for that. A lot of times people will come on here and say, hey, I missed it. How do I find out about it? All my stuff is limited time because we like to let people join for a limited time and then we close it up so that we can focus on the group of students. So if you want to be kept in the loop, make sure to head to CraftyGemini.com. A little pop-up will pop up there for you to enter your name and email address, and that will get you on our free email newsletter, okay? So that's the best way to keep in touch with me of what's going on, and I will see y'all Not this Friday because it's not May yet. So next Friday, I will be back for a Fiber Fridays, which has everything to do with knitting, crochet, spinning, fiber, sheep, wool, all the good stuff. And then I'll be back again next week for next Wednesday for WIP Wednesday, another episode, okay? So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. I'm glad you're enjoying these demos and product reviews, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Another episode, okay? So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. I'm glad you're enjoying these demos and product reviews, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Another episode, okay? So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. I'm glad you're enjoying these demos and product reviews, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.